Zlatan Ibrahimovic has criticised the sports setup for children in the USA, saying it has to be said that the sport is expensive. We're talking soccer in particular here. He says very expensive. For example, in order for my children to play in a good football team, I have to pay $3,500 per child. It's not about the figure, but for the whole concept, I dislike it very much because not everyone has the money needed, and the sport should be something for everyone because it unites people of whatever origin. Ali Moreno joining me now. What are your thoughts on his comments, Ale?
Zlatan is absolutely 100% correct when he looks at it from the perspective of everywhere else outside the United States. The world treats soccer as their sport and is the sport of the masses. And so many times you hear the stories of some of these kids that go on to become world-class soccer players. And where did they start? Well, it was in the streets. It was playing with their friends. It's a sport that, for the most part, is an urban sport. But here in the United States, it's a suburban sport. It's white picket fence. It's a sport, sometimes a sport of privilege. And in some ways, it's an exclusive sport because that cost that Zlatan is talking about keeps players and families outside of the sport or out of the sport in an organized manner because they cannot afford it. And that is such a contrast as to what it is in the rest of the world and what the setup is in the rest of the world. And so I understand where Zlatan is coming from. But I also have to say, I have played youth soccer here in the United States. My kid plays youth soccer here in the United States. And I also recognize the challenges that go with trying to change the whole setup. It is so very difficult and complicated, and so many different pieces that have to fit all together in order to start thinking about the idea that it's gonna become something like the rest of the world. The sports culture here in the United States is different. And so the pay for play is something that has been intrinsical to youth soccer and youth sports in general. And so how do you go about changing years and years and years of a certain structure and say, okay, well, now we're going to do it this way and the kids are not going to have to pay. So, well, where's the money coming from then? Who's going to pay the coaches? Who's going to pay for the lights to come on in the facilities? Who's going to pay for the maintenance of the soccer fields that these kids are going to play in? So it's not nearly as easy as to say, well, the system is wrong and we have to change it. Yes, the system may be wrong, but there are all sorts of challenges in order to make sure that it changes and it changes for the better.
But does that not bring with it a diversity problem and when it comes to representation of young kids in US soccer?
Well, of course it does. And that, again, it's part of the issue. And so you have to ask the question, are you getting the best players to the highest level? And do they have a pathway from playing in their backyard or out in front of their houses or in the street? Do they have a pathway to make it to the very top, to make it to Major League Soccer, to make it to the national team level? Are you getting the most talented players through the system and onto the national team? And really the answer to that, I just think is no. You have to believe that in this massive, large country, that there is a lot of kids that are falling through the cracks because they're not quite sure as to what is that path that takes them to the place that they want to be. And so you can go and point out at the fact that it's pay for play, that, yes, that is a flawed system. But then you have to also balance it out with how do you go and sort out the system? What is the solution? And it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's a very, very complicated subject. Not too long ago, about a month ago or so, we just went through the academy system being essentially disbanded by U.S. Soccer, and that was supposed to be sort of the solution to some of the issues they had before with talent identification. That was supposed to be the path in which the best players were supposed to train against each other and play against each other regionally and then on a national level. Well, that's no longer in place. And so that gives you an idea that it's a complicated subject, and there are all sorts of different opinions as to how it should change. I would tell you this. What I know and what I've seen from my experience in youth soccer is that it is, without a doubt, an exclusive sport. It's not inclusive as it is in other places. And that it is a sports of privilege rather than a sports of the masses. And that needs to change, because I think we need to take the sport back to where it is the most successful, the most fun, and that is out in the playground, out in the backyard, out in the streets. That's where you do the most learning, not dribbling through cones or passing drills or running little drills here and there. Those things are important and structure is important. But the most impactful learning and the most fun kids have playing this game happens outside with their friends. And there's not a whole lot of that going on in this country.
No, definitely not. Could the scouting system be updated as well, Ali, to make sure some of these kids aren't slipping through the cracks?
Yes, you can, but you also have to then go back into looking at budgets and how far and deep and extensive are the scouting networks for MLS teams, and how much are they willing to put into that budget, and how much are they willing to spend? Because if you're going to have scouts here and there and everywhere, you're going to have to pay the scouts, and you're going to have to take the time for these people to do their job correctly. And so you need resources. And so you have to then figure out how important is this to you, and what is really the coverage of your scouting network. Are you more concerned about getting your players from abroad and scouting those players abroad? Or are you more concerned about identifying talent locally and trying to nurture that talent and develop that talent? And that's a decision that you have to make as a club and see what makes more sense to you as an organization. You would have to think, and you would have to assume that if you're able to identify talent locally and put that kid through your system, and that kid eventually, because of the nurturing of that talent, that development of that talent, makes it to the top level, that would be a whole lot easier than trying to go identify talent abroad and then pay for those kids to come here and then make sure that those kids actually feature in your first team. It's an organizational decision, but it's also a budget decision. It's a financial decision. Where do you put your money, and how much are you relying on the development of American talent or local talent in order for your team to be successful?
So it seems that Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Ali Moreno have both said here there's still a lot of work to be done when it comes to the future of US youth soccer.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.